I'll never forget the first time I realized just how far some people will go when they think they've got power over you. It was a warm Saturday morning, the kind where the lake looks like glass, and the air is so still you can hear a fish jump 100 yards away. I was standing at the edge of my dock, coffee in hand, when a woman I'd only met once stormed down the hill in khakis and a stiff white blouse clipboard tucked under her arm, like she was carrying the Constitution itself. She didn't say good morning, she didn't even look at the water. She pointed right at me and said, "If you don't sign these HOA papers today, we'll have no choice but to fine you until you comply." That was my introduction to the war for Lake Serenity. Now here's the thing, this wasn't some neighborhood pond we all shared equally. My grandfather bought this lake and 50 acres around it back in the 50s. He left it to my mom, and when she passed, it came to me. The deed wasn't fuzzy. The lake, the shore, the dock, they were mine. I'd been living in Chicago writing code and minding my own business. But when I inherited the property, I figured I'd restore the cottage, spend some time out there, maybe rent kayaks in the summer. I wasn't looking for a fight. But this woman, who I later learned was named Karen Wilson, decided she'd make it one. Her husband Doug followed a few steps behind her, shuffling papers and nodding at everything she said. They had that look, you know, the type, the people who mistake authority for ownership. Karen shoved the clipboard into my chest and told me the mandatory dues were $750 a month. I just stared at her, then at the deed in my hand, then back at her. "Ma'am," I said, "this property isn't under your HOA. Never has been. Never will be." She blinked, then gave me this cold little smile. "Oh, that exemption expired years ago. You'll find that out the hard way." And just like that, she turned and marched back up the hill. Doug trailed behind her like a man who'd learned not to speak unless she gave him permission. That night, I called Mr. Jenkins, the old family lawyer, who'd handled the transfer. He chuckled and said, "Son, they've been trying this trick for decades. Your grandfather warned me about them. The HOA has no jurisdiction over your land or the lake. They know it, but intimidation gets most people to fold. You stand your ground, you'll be fine." I wanted to believe him. But within a week, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my boathouse. Unauthorized dock modification. It read, "Threatening fines and legal action." The kicker, the dock had been there since my grandfather built it. I took a picture, sent it to Jenkins, and he just sighed. "Classic Wilson move," he said. "We'll handle it." The next Saturday, I decided to host a picnic, invite the neighbors, show them the real deed, maybe break the ice. Frank, the caretaker, who'd been around since my granddad's time, grilled burgers while I laid out maps and copies of the plat survey. Folks were curious, some skeptical, but the mood was good. Then right on cue, Karen pulled up in her pontoon boat, Doug at the wheel. She called the sheriff before she even set foot on the sand. Officer Rodriguez arrived, took one look at the deed, and his whole face changed. "This checks out," he said, looking Karen dead in the eye. "This property isn't yours to police." She tried to argue, but her voice cracked. She snatched at the deed, almost tore it, then stormed off. The neighbors saw it all. For the first time, they started questioning her authority. But Karen didn't back down. A week later, trucks rolled up on the North Shore with chainsaws and bulldozers claiming community maintenance. They waved a county permit with a letterhead. Something felt off. I called Jenkins. Within hours, he confirmed it. The permit was altered. The real one only allowed them to clear brush at the community center. They'd forged the rest. Rodriguez shut it down on the spot. That's when the intimidation really began. I woke up one morning to find a circle of dead fish laid out on my dock, with an HOA membership application pinned in the middle. It was creepy, juvenile, and criminal all at once. Frank muttered that he hadn't seen that kind of stunt since my grandfather first refused to join. Days later, I got a visit from a man in a tailored suit, James Everett, a developer with smooth words and a grin that never reached his eyes. He offered to buy the lake outright. "You'd be set for life," he said, slipping a business card onto my table. When I refused, he leaned closer. "Accidents happen on lakes. Think about it." Then he walked out like he'd just ordered a sandwich. That night, 5 boats floated out onto the water without their running lights. They circled, slow engines, humming voices carrying across the still water. Everett himself called out across the lake, offering $20 million. I stood on the dock with my flashlight, my neighbors slowly gathering behind me. Mrs. Patel, who'd always kept to herself, stepped forward and shouted back, "This lake isn't yours to buy. Go home." The line had been drawn. I refused Everett's offer, and I knew then this wasn't just about money, it was about control. The very next morning, a front-page story hit the local paper. Reporter Michael Chen had been digging into HOA finances and found a direct trail from Karen and Doug's accounts to Everett's development company, which in turn was tied to a casino project 2 counties over. The whole thing stank of money laundering and fraud. Jenkins filed paperwork establishing a conservation trust that same day, legally placing the lake under permanent protection. 7 community members, including Mrs. Patel and even Officer Rodriguez, were named trustees. The HOA couldn't touch it. Neighbors started resigning from the HOA in droves. Dues went unpaid, meetings went empty. Karen tried to stage a press conference in her driveway, waving around more forged documents, but cameras caught her hand shaking as reporters pressed her with Chen's findings. The next morning, Rodriguez and federal agents served warrants at both the HOA office and the Wilsons' home. Boxes of files were hauled out. And at the same time, FBI agents raided Everett's casino offices. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, it all came crashing down. When Everett showed up at my cottage later that week demanding an answer, he was met by agents waiting with handcuffs. Watching him get walked across my dock in front of half the community was one of the most surreal, satisfying moments of my life. Boats honked their horns. Kids clapped. Even Frank, a man of few words, said, "Your granddad would have liked this." Karen and Doug. They tried to play victims, but evidence tied them to arson attempts on nearby cabins and years of forged permits. They ended up indicted. The HOA dissolved within months. In its place, the Conservation Trust took root. 1 year later, we held a ribbon cutting for a new community center built with donations, not dues. Families swam freely, kids learned about ecology, and neighbors who used to whisper started smiling again. 3 years down the road, the Trust launched a youth program called Lake Guardians. Kids tracked water clarity, planted native grasses, even tagged fish. The lake started healing. We won a case in state Supreme Court that set precedent for other communities fighting crooked HOAs. Lake Serenity became a model not just for conservation, but for how a neighborhood could choose stewardship over control. And me, I went from being a guy who wrote code in a dark apartment to someone who carried a whole community's trust. Funny how life works. My grandfather used to say, "The land doesn't belong to you, you belong to the land." Took me 30 years and a showdown with a corrupt HOA president to really understand that. Now I'll leave you with this. What do you think? Was Karen just drunk on power, or was she truly convinced she was doing the right thing? And when it comes to neighborhoods and rules, where do we draw the line between order and freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because this story isn't just about me. It's about every one of us who's ever had to stand up when someone tried to take what wasn't theirs. If you've ever faced anything like this, share your story. And if you think justice was served, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and let's keep these conversations going.